Everybody knows social media is bad for society, but why? And are our fears reasonable? The public concern around social media demonstrates many characteristics of moral panic. E.Good and N.Ben-Yehuda in Moral Panics, The Social Construction of Deviance, say moral panic is characterised by a feeling held by a substantial number of people in a society that the behaviour of evildoers threatens the well-being, moral values and interests of that society. While there are serious concerns surrounding the physical dangers and physical effects of social media, today I'll be focusing on social effects. In particular, I'll discuss concerns surrounding addiction to social media and social isolation. Before we look into social isolation, we must first understand the meaning of addiction when referring to social media. Danah in its complicated The Social Lives of Network Teens discusses the stigma of addiction attached to social media. She says teens use the word in passing towards online activities, but media coverage has amplified the notion that today's youth is uncontrollably hooked on these new technologies. Boyd says it's easier to blame social media for undesirable outcomes rather than consider other social, cultural or personal factors that may be at play. This is demonstrative of media effects, which Gauntlett says links the media with human behaviour. In week 2, Stephen Harrington said new media often attracts media effects. For example, the same concern we feel towards social media today is similar to concerns about Gutenberg's printing press in the 15th century. The issue with media effects is that it often implicitly provides easy answers to complex problems. Boyd says this addiction to social media is a new extension of typical human engagement, where using technology as a primary mode of sociality is likely a side effect of cultural dynamics. According to her research, this demonstrates most teens aren't addicted to social media. If anything, they're addicted to each other. There's no doubt concerns have further developed since the introduction of smartphones and social media apps, allowing 24/7 access. There's a moral panic based on the idea that these addictions have led to social isolation. In Making is Connecting, Gauntlett describes social capital as the advantage gained by possessing a durable network of more or less institutionalised relationships. It measures the connection we have to people with shared interests or opinions. Putnam, author of Bowling Alone, discusses how we've become increasingly disconnected from family and friends. The Bowling Alone website says more Americans are bowling than ever before, but they're not bowling in leagues. Gauntlett argues this doesn't mean they're bowling alone. It's just likely people are bowling with friends and family for fun, rather than competition. In Social Capital, John Field explains bowling as a metaphor for a type of associational activity which brings relative strangers together on a routine basis, helping to sustain a wider set of networks and values. It makes sense then that Gauntlett concludes activities like bowling, music or crafts may not have a direct impact on society itself, but people who meet up to engage in their shared interest have the opportunity to foster these relationships. These kinds of activities act as a social glue which is supported by the widespread reach of social media. Putnam says we're isolating ourselves as a result of technology and social media, but he also argues that the essence of social capital is that social networks have value. What is missing here is the opportunity to network through new technology. In his Week 5 lecture, Stephen Harrington said social media enables people to connect with greater ease, thus widening social networks. This technology is what makes events like zombie walks, flash mobs, or fundraisers so far-reaching. We're not becoming socially isolated due to social media. If anything, it's now easier for people to connect on a much broader scale. Despite this, we need to acknowledge there can be adverse effects of social media. In an article from New York Times, Mark Oppenheimer responds to studies on social isolation and technology by Keith Hampton. Oppenheimer says today we face psychological consequences of feeling bound to our phone, but this toll comes at a personal cost. More importantly, technology isn't nearly as hard on our social relationships as many would assume. Marshall McLuhan refers to media as extension of man. We're often too quick to blame social media for society's problems rather than looking to the users. In his Week 5 lecture, Stephen Harrington depicted the car crash analogy, where he explained people's tendency to look to the driver instead of the car for fault. Are the problems associated with social media always due to the technology, or is it how we use it? Social media has become a vital part of modern life. Does that mean we're addicted? Are we now deprived of social connection? Not necessarily. Humans seek social connection for personal fulfillment and a sense of belonging. In Week 5, Stephen Harrington suggested social media has become a tool for making these social connections, and therefore a tool for human happiness. And how can that be so bad?